hi everyone, welcome to the 7th annual Rubenstein Internship and Research Plan. Yeah, wonderful, great. I just want to start off by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Western Abenaki people, and that part of our practice is acknowledging the presence and controversial history of the land that we're on. And all of you have done some really deep work with the land and people in this area and beyond. And so I think really bringing that insight into your work tonight is really important. I was really humbled going through your presentations just by the wealth of knowledge that exists in this room and all the things that you've done. I think that you're entering the workforce and your classes like with so many skills and so much knowledge, and I just am really humbled that you're all here and that you get to present. So we're gonna go through this. You'll get 3 minutes. So those of you who just got in here, you'll get 3 minutes. You'll get a 1-minute warning, and then a little alarm will go off at 3 minutes, and you can wrap up the thought that you're on and close out by the end of tonight. Well, if we have a little bit of time, there can be some mingling or some Q&A at the end. Again, lots of snacks in the back. I hope you enjoy. And we're gonna start first with Jack Locker. That's great. If you don't have the light in your eyes, can you move? Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Hello everyone, happy Tuesday. My name is Jack Locker. You see him pronouns, and I am an environmental studies student, plant biology minor at Rubenstein. And this summer I interned with the Department of Environmental Conservation in the material management section. And so that is a part of the Agency of Natural Resources. And so the other divisions are fish and wildlife, and then parks, rec, and tourism. And so I was under the Department of Environmental Conservation division over here in the waste management and prevention division. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see what this was really like. And then I was kind of hanging out over here under the material management. We were more focused on outreach and talking to people about how to reduce their waste, how to recycle better, and what it's like living in a state with a mandatory compost law. So one of the first things that I did with this internship was I went up to the Coventry landfill. Now this is where a majority of the waste generated in the state ends up. They're slated to receive, or it's permitted to receive, 600,000 tons of our waste per year. They do not allow any waste to come in from out of state, but in other parts, if you're along New Hampshire or near Massachusetts, some of that waste can go out of the state. And so the waste management division overall is responsible for managing our human-created waste, whether that's spills, hazards, and just responding to situations where the environmental integrity is threatened by human pollution. And so the goal of my little subsection within that, my internship, was to really communicate with Vermonters about what they can do as individuals. And a big part of that was going around the state to farmers markets. So I had a lot of freedom with this internship. They really wanted to see what I brought and what my ideas were, and as a result of that, I settled on doing a lot of in-person outreach, because after the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of, during that time, it was all primarily online, and so many people in the state were unable to get face-to-face with these communities who they're supposed to be regulating and assisting through navigating these policies, whether that's strictly from a government standpoint or from the standpoint of how do we manage our natural lands in a way that works for everyone. Yeah, so It was a really cool experience because they hadn't really done anything like this before, and I had never been responsible for setting up my own tabling campaign and events. And so I learned a lot as I went along, you know, such as like getting the shirt and hat. The first couple outings, I didn't have that, so I was just, you know, some schmuck sitting behind the table with a bunch of handouts. Didn't really know what I was there for. Getting rocks, because I had a couple instances where handouts would blow away. And then just learning how to set up in like high traffic areas and developing that confidence so I could just, you know, pretty much cold call people and be like, hey, let's talk trash, but like not in a disrespectful way. And so it was a really cool opportunity to immerse myself in this practical application of skills that I'm learning at UVM and just in life in general, because a lot of people in the world today feel overwhelmed by a lot of these existential challenges and they don't feel heard. So being able to be that person that, you know, makes them feel that their voices are heard and is able to help them direct their grievances and concerns and policy questions to the proper channels was a pretty empowering experience. Yeah, so as you can see from these not blurry pictures, I met some pretty cool individuals. This was taken down in southern Vermont, kind of near Brattleboro. That was a long day of driving. This was over in Colchester. This gentleman, he's up at about 4:30 every day, working 10 hours, picking up garbage, doing everything he can to get his routes done and get waste out of people's mindset, effectively, just getting out of their perception, shipping it up to Coventry. And then I also went to a lot of transfer stations around the state, both commercial and residential, to talk with the technicians who work there about what do you wish people knew, what do you want to communicate to them, what are the general trends that you're seeing, what are you noticing? And overall, it's just very confusing regionally and not just in the state between towns, but also overall in the United States. We had a lot of tourists come from out of state who had never heard of a compost law, who had never heard of a recycling law, who didn't really know how any of this worked. And then with this future of climate migrants coming to the state, these laws need to be communicated to these future neighbors and our future friends. If we all want to get on the same page on how to better manage our waste, and then looking upstream, how do we cut that off at the source and hold corporations accountable for the products that they are selling us. I also did some cool field trips to what they call material recovery facilities. There's one in Rutland and one in Williston that handle all the recyclables in Vermont. These are semi-automated, but also staffed by people like you and me, sifting through our recyclables for hours on end, determining what can be reused, what can't, and what just has to be thrown away. And so that was a pretty powerful experience because I was coming from a very privileged background where I'm just a student from UVM walking through this smelly warehouse, and there's people who are there, 40 hours a week, if not more, going through the trash that I'm generating, my roommates are generating, we're all generating, unless you're zero waste, which is sort of cool. And yeah, so it was really interesting having these experiences on the ground, not only with communities and the people in them who are aware that waste is a challenge, but these people who work in the material recovery facilities, in the transfer stations, and then also in these other organizations called, what's that? Can't remember off the top of my head right now. It's been a bit since the summer. But yeah, there's organizations all over the state committed. And yeah, so it was a very powerful, very wonderful experience getting to meet all the people involved and understand what my agency and my privilege meant in the situation, being an intern with the state of Vermont who approaches things with a top-down approach, which unfortunately has some negative consequences as individuals don't feel like they're heard, like their voice has an impact. And I think the next one. Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone from the DEC, my supervisor, Melissa Eichlor, who was super stressed and overworked this summer and gave me a lot of agency and freedom to do the things that I wanted to do and pursue the projects that I felt passionate about. The people that took me to the material recovery facility, the Coventry landfill, Jeff Bordeaux, Erin Camire, and Bajur, our program manager, Josh Kelly, all the farmers market organizers that I met with and were really accommodating and understanding and helping create a space where I was able to communicate this information, and all of the community members who engaged with me and didn't just look at me on the side of their eyes, keep walking, and many, many others. And of course, thank you to Rubenstein for providing this opportunity. It was very impactful, and I developed a lot of transferable skills that I'm excited to apply in the future. And of course, thank you for sitting through that. They're called solid waste management entities, SWMIs. Yeah. They're all over the state, and regional waste management is often
yeah. So challenging to go first, so extra kudos. Thank you. All right, up next, got Sam.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam. I'm a senior from Bryn, Vermont. I'm going to tell you about my experience with watershed consulting this summer. So just a quick start, what is watershed consulting? And I'll go into what I did in the field and the office, and then the things that I learned from my experience. And just this picture, I think it's cool. It's my childhood park where I played basketball my whole childhood. I get to spend the day making a big hole in it. Okay, so intro to what is watershed consulting. It's a small consulting firm, so there's only around 10 people that work there, and most of them are UVM graduates, which is pretty cool that they employ the people who come from here. Their main jobs are all related to stormwater permitting, so coming up with permits, designing infrastructure, doing monitoring after things are built, and then planning for the future. Some of the clients are pretty big: state of Vermont, UVM, Chittenden County, RPC, some other municipalities. So there's some pretty big clients and some small ones too, just like subdivisions and small businesses. So it's a wide range of people that I did work for this summer. So some of the things I did in the field, I spent around half my time on a good week doing field work. Most of it was involving soils, so digging holes with an excavator and then measuring the soil horizons. Another thing with soil was infiltration testing, where you dig a hole with an auger and then measure how quickly the hole eats water. So then you can design things to work with that type of soil. We also did permit inspections at big industrial sites, which, because it's a consulting job, I'm not supposed to talk about where they were, the companies, things like that, but just making sure that their permits are being followed. And I think my favorite thing was illicit discharge detection. So we would go around in a municipality and sample all of their outfalls, like this picture right here. So we'd find the pipe, it would be mapped, and if it was flowing, we would take a water sample from it and kind of do like a little chemistry test in the back of the car and test it for different indicators of either wastewater getting into the stormwater or drinking water. So that was probably my favorite because it was like chemistry class, but in real life. And then I did a couple days of drone mapping with this super cool, super expensive fixed wing drone that would fly up and map the terrain that we were working with. So I spent the other half of my time in the office. That's my very wooden, nice desk there. I was mainly working with GIS. So I'd make maps and do drainage areas and land cover stuff. So the farthest image to the left is what I spent most of my time doing. We called it adult coloring because it would just be drawing polygons over different kinds of land use so that it could be used for analysis later. I learned a lot about GIS from working with the experts who are only working in GIS at the company. And yeah, it was a really good learning experience to get better at GIS. So my final takeaways from this internship is that I really like the consulting world. It's a really good mix of being able to work in the field, but not have to do it every single day. I've done that in the past where you're like cutting honeysuckle every day and it gets kind of old over time. As I said, being able to work in GIS is really important to the things that I was working on. Working in a small company has benefits and downsides. So a benefit is I knew all my coworkers really well. I worked with everybody. And I could kind of bounce ideas off them and get help with things. A downside is you have to share things and you don't have as many resources as you may have at a really big company. And I know what I want to do, or at least I think I do moving forward, is to look for a job that's kind of similar to what I did this summer.
Troy and Nick. Yeah, come on, what is it? Slides, do those happen?
You can do it. There's only like 4 slides.
Okay, sorry about it.
Hi, I'm Troy Ahmed, and
My name's Nick Nowie.
this summer we were working with a company called Habitat Restoration Solutions. It's a small company out of Heinsberg, and this summer we worked pretty much on 2 main fronts: invasive plant removal and stream restoration. And we also work for a pretty small company. On a good day, we have 5 people, and Nick's going to tell you more about the stream restoration.
So the first part of what we did was the stream restoration, as Troy mentioned. We had one main site in the southern point of Addison County on 22A. It was a large, expansive fielded area that was privately owned by a farmer. And what we did was we found an incised stream that had complaints about having a lack of a floodplain, and our job was to reconstruct this floodplain. The 2 main methods of what we did were the construction of what were called PALs and BDAs. Those stand for post-assisted log structures and beaver dam analogs. The first one, the PALs, are built on the side of an incised stream to redirect the water to push out the flood bank on one side. And the BDAs are built across the entire stream. That is to back up the water to expand the floodplain on both sides. And one of the big things we did with this is we gathered all the resources from the immediate surrounding areas, and in conjunction with removing invasive species, we used those plants and those woody debris to create more structures to try and keep all the natural biomass within the same sphere where we took it from. Also, once we created these structures and started to, remove the inside stream the floodplains, we planted native grasses. What we did was we went to surrounding areas and collected by hand buckets of native grasses, as well as apple seeds and elm seeds. And you can see in this picture up here, it's a little blurry. This lighter grass up here is a very invasive reed canary grass, which was through the whole field. And this darker section up here is the native grasses that we replanted. That picture was taken around 2 weeks ago when I was driving down 22 and I saw that and slammed on my brakes and swerved to the side of the road to take this picture because I saw you can actually see noticeable results, which is a really cool aspect of this job.
And the second part of our job this summer was invasive plant control. And I'm going to tell you about 2 things about it. What we controlled and our methods. So for the most part this summer, we were working with buckthorn, common, and glossy buckthorn. For those, we would cut it down, do cut stump, and harvest some of the stems to use in the stream restoration. We would work with honeysuckle, Asiatic bittersweet, chervil, and a bunch of other invasive plants. And the methods that we used, we would have a bunch of chainsaws, and we would go into the woods or go on into the edges of fields, cut down buckthorn, honeysuckle, the smaller ones, and do cut stump, which is where you cut it down to a stump and take out a bingo blotter full of herbicide, and you would just blot it on the cambium of the plant, and that should go down into the roots and stop it from growing back.
Another similar thing we did was hack and squirt, which is where you go up to bigger trees and you take the chainsaw and you cut all the way around it so you can get to the cambium and spray some herbicide just in there. And hopefully that'll kill the tree without needing to fell it. That way you don't damage or trample any of the other plants around it. We also did a lot of pulling, like with the shovel. It's pretty self-explanatory. You just go, pull it, toss it in the bucket, then toss it in a garbage bag. And then another part of the company, we get to do it during the summer because it's usually not done during the summer, is foliar, which was on the first slide. You just get a backpack full of herbicide and you spray the leaves. That way the plant intakes the herbicide and kills the leaves and kills the plant.
Yeah, so some major takeaways from the summer. It was a really cool experience. One of probably the best things about this was that just about every day we went somewhere else. It was very rare that we went to the same place multiple times in a row unless it was a major project. But we were all over the county, all over the state, doing a variety of different jobs. We got to work with a lot of different groups. We got to work with the Nature Conservancy, Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, some students from Dartmouth, a couple people just doing passion projects who are really passionate about doing invasive species control, which is, speaking to them, something people don't really acknowledge as much as it should be. We got to meet, this great cow at one of our sites that always ran up the fence for us to pet it on its way out. But a lot of other skills that were really improved, invasive plant identification, invasive plant removal techniques, how to operate a chainsaw, how to repair a chainsaw, how to just, be mindful of your equipment when you're in the middle of the woods and you don't have the resources to go back to your truck and get more gas. You have to pack it all out with you, go out. If your chainsaw breaks, you got to hope you have the parts to fix it with you. And it was just all around a really great experience. Again, special thank outs to Bob Himes from HRS and everyone else that we worked with this summer. It was a great opportunity and I'm thankful for the experiences we had. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So the sound has gone from drums to crickets.
Yeah.
Just so. All right, Carissa.
Hi everyone, my name is Carissa Finnerty. I'm a senior environmental science major here in the Rubenstein School. This summer I had the opportunity to intern at the George J. Aiken Forestry Sciences Lab under the Cool Air Pooling Project. So just a little background on this lab that I was based out of. It's quite a multi-purpose building in that there are many partners that share it, including the U.S. Forest Service, UVM, American Chestnut Foundation, Lake Champlain Sea Grant, and the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative. The project I specifically focused on, which was CAP, focuses on temperature inversions in mountainous regions. To understand kind of the physics of that, I don't know if you guys can see this, but in this image, you can see that as long wave radiation is re-emitted at the end of the day, it leaves a lot of dense, cool air that pulls in valleys and depressions. If you look at this graph from one of my bosses, Dr. Melissa Pastor, you can see that as elevation increases, so does temperature, which is generally seen as quite abnormal. So a lot of what I did had to do with some prep tasks, a little bit of data collection in the field, but also mostly sample processing at the end of our site visits. So the majority of my prep tasks included programming air temperature sensors, which you can see right here, and some soil temperature sensors. In the field, it depended on where we were, what I did. In Vermont, I got to replace a lot of temperature sensors to collect data from the year before, but we did have the opportunity to go to Maine and set up completely new transects for collect completely new data, which is really fun. We got to measure ground and canopy cover, diameter, types of vegetation in that area, soil samples, and then we put out some materials to collect proxy data as well. The bulk of what I did happened back at the lab with soil, where I separately processed dry litter from duff from mineral soil. And a lot of that had to do with biogeochemistry measurements that we would take then or in the future. A lot of this work was really important to understand how in these naturally occurring cool air pools, how in the future with climate change, species that are adapted to cool environments can migrate to these areas. And then furthermore, how that might change carbon storage, which as we know, can be also really important to understand the future of climate change. For myself, I think this really confirmed my interest in climate studies as an environmental science major. Also helped me to explore and discover where I see myself physically working within the environmental science field and learn to take initiative within my work and be confident in the independence that I was awarded. So for all that, I'd like to thank Marie English, who is here today, Karen Rand, who were my on-site supervisors, Dr. Melissa Pastor, Dr. Carol Adair, who were my remote mentors, and the Georgia Avian Forestry Science Lab, and of course, Rubenstein for providing me this opportunity. Thank you.
Very cool. All right, Ethan.
I'm Ethan. I'm a junior environmental science major from South Hero, Vermont. And this summer I worked on the Vermont Cyanobacteria Monitoring Project. So some of the partners in this project has been going on for, I think, over a decade. The Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, as well as the Department of Health and the Lake Champlain Committee, all combined on this project. At the moment, it's led by Peter Isles, part of the Lakes and Ponds Division of the state, who was my supervisor for this project. Some of the goals, there's short-term monitoring and reporting for safety. So that's when you'll see Oak Ledge and Letty and a lot of those beaches will get closed over the summer, especially during storm surge events. And part of this project is reporting those unsafe water conditions so the public stays safe, as well as utilization of some GIS and dynamic mapping. There's this Cyano Tracker website that gets updated every day during the summer. So part of the project is providing the data to the volunteers who update the website, as well as keeping the website running. And the part of the project that I was most focused in was the long-term data analysis, and more specifically collecting that data to be able to analyze overall trends in lake health, and especially in cyanobacteria blooms as the years go on. And lastly, community involvement. Just like I said, volunteers are pretty involved with this. There's volunteers sampling, there's volunteers updating the website. And so making sure the community is involved and it's a holistic process is an important part of the project. So my role this summer, most of my time was spent counting samples. I was in the Rubenstein lab down at Echo working on a microscope most of the day. So there's a pretty specific process I had to learn. It took quite a bit of practice. I had to learn how to identify 15 to 20 species of cyanobacteria and learn how to count individual species. So that took probably 2 weeks of practice of counting last year's samples, as well as counting duplicates to make sure that the counting process as well as my own counting was accurate. But my favorite part of this summer was being able to go out and actually collect samples on the DEC boat. Myself and Alex, who is the partner intern for this, were able to go out on the boat a few times and kind of learn how the whole process worked and to be more of a part of it than just counting on the microscope. So this is what I would see day to day. On the left there is more zoomed out, just a kind of example of what you'd see in one sample. And then on the right here was the 20 times zoom that I used. I think one of the most challenging parts of this project were knowing what not to count. So basically all of this is algae. It's not actually the cyanobacteria. Kind of up here and here, you have two different kinds of cyanobacteria. So a lot of the training process was really me learning what I can count and what I don't. And here's just a quick way to show the counting process. It was pretty involved, measuring sample volumes and stuff is pretty easy, but I had to know how many fields to count. I chose a range of between 10 and 20 fields. It should be just one of those circles like up on the right. And adjust that for density and then go through and use the sampling process or the counting process that has been developed over quite a few years in this document and then the magic of Excel kind of extrapolates it to be able to tell you for each location, like for instance, some of the locations are the Highgate Springs or St. Olaf Bay or Red Rocks. It'll extrapolate and be able to tell you the cyanobacteria, the amount of cyanobacteria at that moment for that area.
How's it going? My name is Kai, senior he/him here at the University of Vermont. I'm a forestry major, and I spent the summer studying the Ethereum species complex at the Barrington Sandu lab. So here, my role and my goal was to basically aid in researching the species complex of the lady ferns, also known genus Ethereum, and to discover to what extent cryptic diversity exists within the complex. My daily responsibilities were to generate data analysis and figures to better explain the differences within this genus. In short, basically, we just wanted to see to what extent these kind of tiny clusters within the genus and how different they were, whether they deserve to be their own species, or whether they were just perhaps even hybrids. Next slide. So methods, I did 3 major things. So to investigate, I studied 6 different clades, which were kind of like our study groups. And you can see each of those clades lining the side here. To determine the differences here, we did PCR analysis to see whether certain genes were found. This is pretty similar to COVID, COVID testing that we've done. I also did PCA, which is principal component analysis. It's like a statistics method to see just how related things are and how different variables in the data affect them. So we used it in this case to study key bioclimatic factors and to see whether there were ecological niche spaces. And we also did GIS mapping. And so these were my results from the summer. We were able to kind of map out all of our clades that we were studying. You can see these pretty cool geographic clusters. In the top left was the kind of evolutionary timeline that we were able to create using this data. Next to that is just an example of a PCR result. Those highlighted bands are hits. It's where we were able to see the prevalence of the gene that we were studying. And then to the right here is just that PCA in which we were able to see that each of these colors represents one of our clades, and the clustering of them kind of proves that they do have their own niche space. Especially above ground here, in which we were looking at the mean annual temperature, annual precipitation, and seasonality. And then I just really want to thank Bertrand in the back there, as well as Michael Sandu and David Barrington, who were the namesakes of the lab, as well as Tom Michaels, Julia, and Jack, who were my fellow lab technicians. That's it. And thank you to the biology department.
All right, Dina.
It's okay. Hi, I'm Dina. These slides are about to be really wordy because I sent the wrong ones, so bear with me. But I worked in Shelley Rayback's dendrology lab over the summer, and I'm continuing to work in that lab on the same project because it's very, very long. So the official name of the project is using dendroisotopes to reconstruct the 20th and 21st century water use efficiency in northeastern North American forests. So as you know, the atmosphere has been changing composition a lot, and one of those things is increased carbon dioxide in the air, and we want to kind of reconstruct climate events through tree rings, because they give us annual resolution, because each ring of a tree is correlated to a calendar year. This project was funded by the Oak Lawn Foundation, and it required a lot of collaboration between different scientists. So that involved field sampling, which is this is a tree ring core before it's process, like straight out of the tree. So visual cross dating is another thing, sample pooling, cellulose extraction, and then measuring the carbon-13 isotope, which is the dendroisotope of interest. I did not mention that. Using the mass spec, which is in Canada. So, okay. So my role in this project was literally chopping up each tree ring core into its individual rings and then organizing each ring into their calendar year for each like sample set of like trees. So each sample set had about 6 trees under the same canopy that were of the same species, but they were different trees. And I would crush them up in this fun little thing. I just had to add this into the slide because it's very funny to me. It's called a wiggle bug, and it just crushed up the samples, and it was very scary. Sometimes that little thing would just like fly off, but it's okay. And then I carried out the experiments to extract the cellulose, and soon I'm going to package up the cellulose in little capsules for the mass spec that is in Canada. And that's kind of what the sample pooling looks like. As you can see, each of these capsules have the dates, and this is how I would like chop it up, put it in a little capsule, chop the next one, put it in the capsule. You get the idea. And then I did some field work over the summer to collect more samples. Those are my samples. Yeah, it was 2 days. I've never done field work like that, so that was pretty cool. And then, okay, so what I learned. So I was the only undergrad that was hired for this project. It was literally just me, Shelly Rayback, and Andrea Lini working on this project together. So I learned how to work independently in a lab. I now know how to extract cellulose from wood, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, I think that's it, right? That's awesome. Yes.
I got Dakota.
So my name's Dakota. I'm a junior forestry major here at Rubenstein, and this summer I was working with the silviculture lab, which is with the forestry lab at UVM in Corinth, Vermont. And so I was working as a field technician, doing field work each day at the Clement Woodlot, which is owned and managed by Dartmouth College, and it's about a 700-acre property. And there's a lot of research projects going on there, but the one we were working on was studying the effects of emerald ash borer and climate change on forest health. And in Corinth, ash trees make up about 40% of the canopy. And so with this experiment, there was 3 different management treatments and 1 control. And so most of the work that we were doing was measuring vegetation plots, and the vegetation plots were scattered throughout the forest systematically and within these different management blocks. And kind of the goal for the study was to help researchers understand how the different management actions contribute to forest resiliency in relation to the emerald ash borer, which is the invasive species it's a beetle affecting the health of ash trees and causing a large die-off. But so yeah, most of the work was measuring vegetation plots, which is we went and it's a fixed radius plot. We recorded the diameter and species of overstory trees, the species and count of understory stems, also the understory vegetation, like the plants on the forest floor, as well as coarse woody material, the down logs on the forest floor. And also some of the other work we did in Corinth included brush sawing. It's for a different study where northern hardwood species were planted in cut gaps. There was red oak, black birch, bitternut hickory, American chestnut, I think 1 more that I'm forgetting, but we were doing brush sawing for competition control. So the competing plants such as like raspberry, bull thistle, and mullein were growing and outcompeting the seedlings that were planted. So we use over here, it's like a weed whacker with a saw blade on the front. We were cutting down all the competing vegetation. For another aspect of the study, you can see the survival rates of those seedlings. And here's a picture of me and Zach, who's on my crew, studying Old Veg Square here in Corinth. And kind of just some highlights from the summer, just being able to, learn new things each day and being able to explore like new remote forested areas in Vermont and New Hampshire that I wouldn't be able to see otherwise. And while most of the work was done in Corinth, Vermont, I was able to travel to some other sites to do similar vegetation plot measurement. Like this picture is in Groton State Forest, Vermont. It's a cut gap, and both those other pictures are from Corinth. And then kind of just some takeaways was learning and refining existing skills that I have, such as tree and plant identification, as well as common forest measurements, networking opportunities, kind of just while working, either meeting foresters out in the field and talking to them about the kind of work they're doing, or other research teams working out in Corinth who we would encounter frequently and talking to them. And it was really just a valuable learning experience for me throughout the summer. And yeah, this is the crew I work with, me, Kat, and Zach, and thank them for a great summer, and Rubenstein and the Forestry Lab for that opportunity.
Hi guys, my name is Agnes. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior environmental studies major. And this summer for the perennial internship, I worked as the solarium and greenhouse horticulturist. And so throughout the summer, I spent my time between the greenhouse and the Aiken solarium. And so in the greenhouse, some of my main responsibilities included general plant care. And so I spent a lot of time watering the research houses. So it was really cool to get like a behind the scenes look at research happening on campus during the summer. I also learned how to apply and mix liquid fertilizer. Then I also like brushed up on some techniques like pruning and just like maintaining general plant care. And then I also got experience transplanting and repotting plants for both production and in the greenhouse's collection. And then I also got experience working with IPM, which is integrated pest management. And so that included scouting for pests in the various research houses. And then I also spent a lot of time applying different beneficial insects like mites, just as a biological means of controlling the pests in the greenhouse. And then at the end of the spring semester, I helped with the plant sales. This was a picture of that time of year, so it was super pretty in the greenhouse. And then I also managed the UVM greenhouse Instagram page over the summer where I did like monthly plant highlights, so that was really fun. And then in the solarium, my main job was just taking care of the plants in there. And so it included some of the same things like watering, pruning, transplanting, and repotting. And then instead of liquid fertilizer, we used granular fertilizer, Osmocote in there. And then it was really fun getting to introduce new plants to this space. Like if you see the display bed, which is if you enter it again, it's directly on the left, no. Yeah, on the left. And so I got to kind of like redesign that space and then and like learn some plant propagation and division techniques as well. Then I also worked IPM in Aiken as well, so I really learned how to keep detailed scouting records. And then I applied beneficial insects like Roth beetles. They're a little scary, but if you see them in there, they're meant to be there. And then also some like organic insecticides. Then I also worked on some other projects, like I made a plant log of all the species in there, so you can see that posted around in Aiken. And then my experience, I had a lot of fun this summer. I really got a lot of hands-on experience and knowledge in the greenhouse and horticultural fields. So I really built on some of my prior knowledge about like IPM and plant management. I also just gained a lot of confidence in my personal skills in horticulture and just like working in a new environment. Then I also just learned how a multi-purpose greenhouse operates. So the UVM greenhouse is used for research, plant production, as well as just their collection. So you can like visit there and just see their collection of plants. It was just a lot of fun. I got like a lot of interest in the greenhouse fields and working more with horticulture. It was really cool to just be on campus during the summer and like connect with the Rubenstein staff. So yeah. And also I just want to give a big thank you to Derek, who's here in the back, as well as Michelle and Dave, who really helped me out this whole summer, so thank you.
And if you have classes in here, I'm sure you've seen how awesome the solarium looks and was like super welcoming when you all got back to campus. Because we're about halfway, I'm wondering if people just want to take like a 1 minute, get food, stretch, go to the bathroom kind of situation. And I also want to just remind people that we do have people presenting towards the end, so maybe some solidarity with your later presenters. If you have to go somewhere, that's fine, but if you can stay, encourage it. So see you in a minute. Next up is the big group. You needed a break. Well, that's what I guess I should turn off the mic. I'm still recording. I can cut the recording. I'll edit this out. Kathy, can you pull everyone back, please? Can you pull everyone back? Oh, they. All right, FEMC crew. And everyone's here. Yay!
Maybe it's.
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
Are you okay if I'm behind you? Okay.
Hey, hello. I'm Micah, forestry major at UVM. I'm Sam, I'm a junior forestry major.
I'm Emma, I'm a junior forestry major.
I'm Madeline, I'm a senior forestry major.
I'm Spencer, I'm a junior forestry major.
Yeah, we work for FEMC this summer.
Yeah, so the FEMC is the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative, and it's out of the Rubenstein Forestry office on Spear Street. And we were working in the forest health monitoring division of that, I guess. So a lot of our work was just kind of like field work, pretty much entirely field work, going out to plots, usually camping for those plots. And it's like we would get coordinates, we'd often have to do like a long hike or bushwhack and yeah, measure different forest health aspects at each of those plots.
Yeah, so when we were in the field, we navigated the plots using a GPS and compass. We collected forest health data, which we'll go into later. We interacted with landowners where the plots were, organized the logistics of camping in city forests through data collection each week. We traveled all around the Northeast to get to these plots, and from New Hampshire, New York, and Massachusetts. And then each day we worked as a team to effectively collect data.
Yeah, so this is an example of some of the data that we collected. So we would take the diameter at breast height of each tree, the height of each tree, and we would use two different types of tools. To take the height, we would use a hypsometer, which is kind of like a laser tool, and then we'd use a planometer if it was raining outside, because the hypsometer doesn't work in the rain. And then we would also do microplots within our plots that would assess the saplings that we had there. So we'd identify those saplings and count how many we had.
Yeah, and so the like forest health monitoring side of what we did is we would like assess all the trees found within our plots. And so we would look at the bigger the tree, how effective that tree is growing, like how able that tree is to like respond to like disturbance events or different things happening in the ecosystem. We look at transparency, which is how much light gets through the crown. That's also like a tell of how like thick and full and healthy the crown of that tree is. Crown class, where that crown is relative to other crowns of the trees in the canopy of that area. So like you have your dominant trees, your co-dominant trees, then your intermediate trees, and your trees that are suppressed. And then we also look at dieback, which is when the fine twigs at the ends of the tree's branches die due to a lot of that'll happen due to drought, due to like a pest invading the tree. It's just a tree's response to some sort of stress. And then defoliation and discoloration. Defoliation is we would look at the tree and see like what percent surface area of the leaves has been defoliated by insects, and discoloration is looking at what kind of percentage of surface area of the leaves are discolored. And then we'd also look for special damages. So like if a huge branch had fallen off, if there was a giant crack or seam in the tree, or if there was some sort of like burl or fungus on the tree, we'd also look at that.
And then the last two, we would look at the browse in the plot. So if deers had come in and kind of browsed on the understory, and then we'd assess for invasive species. So that could be both like plants and insects. And we'd also take the basal area per acre of our plots, which would be using a prism, is what the tool is called.
So while most of the stuff we did was collecting data, we did do some like inputting the data into a database. And the goal of the project is to monitor forest health over time. So this project has been going on for quite some time, and it's pretty unique in that it's done every year. And I think most projects like this are done like around every 7 years. So it's pretty cool to be able to see those changes. And it can be accessed by anyone and used basically by any researchers or people who want to look into forest health. And if you have like a very specific thing you want to study within that, you can use the database and basically find any of the data that we collected, because we did collect such a broad scale of metrics. So it's pretty cool that they can access that and use it to, yeah, do their studies.
Yeah, so this is kind of some pictures that I took over the summer. It was a very fun summer. We did a lot of team bonding. That was one of the best things that we all got, I think, from this opportunity. We were all like in a super tight-knit community. We'd go camping almost every week. It was very fun, and I personally got like a really good, this was my first ever fieldwork job. So I got a really good experience in that, and I actually switched my major to forestry after this internship. So it was definitely really rewarding for me.
Here's some pictures that I took over the summer. Also, it was just a great experience. Loved my teammates, loved the work I did. Some things that I learned, I think I improved on time management a lot, because we had to be ready to camp and like live out of home, out of state for the whole week. So just being prepared for that, I think helped me a lot. And then I got to really dive deep into like tree identification, and I learned a lot about how forests are structured. Yeah, just a great experience overall.
Yeah, so this is me, I'm Sam again. Yeah, so it was a great experience, just like Emma and Madeline said. Got a lot of team bonding, made some great friends this summer. But mostly I was just really happy to like refine and work on my skills that I've been learning in forestry here at UVM, just basic forest inventory stuff, northern hardwood, mixed forest, tree identification. And I also, one thing we haven't mentioned yet, I learned a lot about the like kind of disastrous effects that invasive species have been having around the Northeast, especially in New York and Massachusetts. Like for every beautiful, pristine spruce and fir forest that we go to in the Adirondacks, there was a red oak stand that was completely defoliated by spongy moths. So it was just really kind of brings things into perspective with like how disastrous and effective these creatures are on our forests.
Yeah, it was pretty rewarding to be able to use all of the skills and data collection techniques that we've been learning for like the past few years in an actual job and have it be used to get data that's being used in like real ways, like tangible ways. So yeah, it was pretty awesome to like have it feel more real, like you're making an impact. And just like being able to see so many different forest types and ecosystems throughout New England was cool because we talk about them a lot, but seeing them throughout New England was definitely cool. And I feel like that'll help me when I'm out doing something in the forestry realm. But yeah, I definitely had an awesome time, learned a lot of things and got a lot better at identification. Yeah, I feel definitely way more prepared to be in field work. So yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, and then here's some pictures that I took, and at least for me over the summer is a lot of just kind of learning to like work on your toes in field work. Like, I don't know, every once in a while we'd get the wrong coordinates for a plot and we had to like backtrack and do a lot of work, or like here, this was a pretty cool beaver dam we ran into, but it also flooded our plot, so we had to like scratch that one and find other locations, things like that. Also, we did some help. We helped out with some soil digging for a study, for soil study. So that was pretty cool. I had a really fun time doing that. Just kind of like, yeah, generally getting to explore the Northeast and like work with some cool people. Thank you guys, and then thank you to Ben Porter, our supervisor Matthias, and Naomi, also other supervisors. They're really great bosses, and Rubenstein as well.
And our crew was like 13 people, so thank you to everybody who worked with us who didn't get to make it. We had coworkers from all over New England and people who go to Middlebury and stuff like that. So
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, hi, my name is Leah, and I was an environmental technician this summer at EHB, which is an environmental consulting company. And so we mainly dealt with a lot of energy and transportation development and doing field work for those study sites. So probably 4 out of 5 of my days were spent in the field. And the one day in the office was spent kind of just doing GIS and getting our study sites mapped and then working with the data that we had mapped in the field. And so this was pretty much my daily view in the field. I worked in a lot of wetlands, so Phragmites is quite tall. Even the goldenrod, and just like I walked a lot of transportation lines and transmission lines, and you pretty much just have goldenrod up to your nose. And so really doing a lot of bushwhacking, but it was really fun, and I got to see a lot of things that you don't really think that you'd expect to see in those areas. And I'm super interested in soil science, so I got to work with my auger and mussel book and do a lot of soil testing in wetlands to delineate them to make sure that they're actually wetlands and could be developed or not developed. And so it was pretty hard to say like what my main responsibilities were because pretty much every day was a different project and doing something different. We did a lot of wetland delineations, like I said, waters and stream mapping. We did Army Corps data points, spread and threatened plant surveys, invasive plant surveys, and potential bat roosting tree surveys, which were my favorite by far, because you're kind of just looking for trees that had really small holes or any like black locust trees with like really crevice bark could house trees. So you take a little data point of that, and I had an iPad, a GPS, and a little antenna. So I really learned how to troubleshoot with GIS, data field equipment. That was a big one, and learned how to take all the data points, and we had different flagging every day to take with us. So each day really kept you on your toes because you're doing something very different. And then, so this was one of the coolest study sites that we were at. It was a windmill farm, wind turbine farm, I guess. And they were doing a bear mitigation project there. So it was a 25-year-long project, and we were doing invasive species modeling there. And we found lots of bear activity. Luckily, we didn't find any bears at that site, but I have seen a few bears this summer. Lots of snakes, few porcupines, some interesting stuff. So that one was a really cool site, but it was a lot of bushwhacking and it was very hilly terrain because it's on the top of a mountain. So we're doing both sides of the mountain up to the wind turbines. But we were on like the 21st year of that project, so it was really cool to see kind of like the past data and how like the invasive species have changed and moved throughout the time there. And then I got to see, like I said, a lot of really cool stuff. This was a bear skull that I found. I found a lot of bones and such, but that one was the coolest one I got, and I got to take one of the teeth actually. So, and then like my biggest takeaways were just really like, I want to be able to work outside. I loved being in the field. I loved having coworkers who were super knowledgeable, and I want to be able to apply all the different disciplines of like the soil science, looking at plants and geology and water, and not just like one thing.
Happy every time. Every time.
All right, I'm Helena. I'm a sophomore. I'm an environmental science major.
I'm Bryn. I'm a wildlife and fisheries bio major, but I'm planning on concentrating in fisheries, and I'm also a sophomore.
So we interned this summer at Cape Ann Whale Watch, and that's in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which you can see up here. Some of our broad responsibilities were maintaining the Whale Watch boat and also loading and directing passengers as they were boarding in the morning and afternoon trips. As we left Gloucester Harbor, we would do a little harbor tour on the mic for all the passengers. And then while we were traveling out to these whales and other wildlife, we would go around and talk to and educate all the passengers. Once we got onto the whales, we were responsible for data collection of the whales or other wildlife behavior. And then at the end of the day, we were responsible for summarizing and kind of compiling all this data after each trip.
So education was a major part of our internship, considering we were basically interning as naturalists. So it did start with our harbor tour. That was around 10 to 15 minutes. It started from the time we left the dock until we reached the breakwater, and there was really nothing left to see. We would touch on anything from just local businesses to historic sites and everything in between. But on our way out to the whales, it could take between 30 minutes to up to 2 hours. It really just depended on the day. So during that whole time, we would walk around with educational tools. There are a few pictures. So in my hands, I have a sample of baleen, and then a chart of baleen and toothed whales, and then also a map of the sea floor where we normally went to. We did have a few more educational tools, but we mainly used these to have small group talks with families and any other passengers, basically explaining what they're going to be seeing or what they possibly could see, why they're seeing it and why it matters, and answer any questions they might have.
Okay, so this is the first type of data that we would collect. So there's two different data sheets. So this is the first one that was qualitative. You can see here starting with the time. This is basically what we call like the on and off time. So this is the time we get to the whale or other species, and then the time that we leave to either go to another species or head back home. The next column is to record the exact location of where these animals are. So the latitude, longitude, and then also the Loran numbers. Next, we have the species that we were on, and then the number of individuals. And then in this notes column, we have, you can see circled names of specific whales. So we would utilize something called photo ID, where we would take a photo of the tail or the fluke of the whale, and we would use the unique patterns on that tail to identify it by name. So that's what you can see here, Jost, and Pinball. We'd also write down any noticeable behavior that would kind of help us to just compile behavioral data on these individuals. And then these up and down arrows signify the dive time of the whale, so how long it's going on a deeper dive in between breaths. And then also any other species that we see in the area that we're not necessarily watching.
And Another major part of our data collection is our quantitative data. So the white paper is just an example of what the data we were taking while we were actually on the whales. We would tally a new tally column every 5 minutes, and each of those 3 letters are just different behavioral things we would see. So it could be anywhere between literally just one blow of a whale to breaching to diving down. It's literally anything they could do is on that paper. And then the blue sheet is just a summary sheet of the exact same data to make it a lot easier to read. But we had a little cheat sheet, but we definitely had to learn a lot about exactly what the whales are doing and why. And then this data plus the summary sheets that we would do afterwards on like what we would see, what the weather was like, the sea conditions, were sent to the Center for Coastal Studies so they could use it for any research they have.
All right, so we're taking all this data, obviously, but it was important for a variety of reasons. So the first was the locational data, and that could be used for just a short-term use, like the captain reporting the location to another captain on another boat, and if they wanted to go and see that animal, or again, like reporting the location to the Center for Coastal Studies if there was an animal that was endangered or entangled or needed to be relocated. Also, as we're kind of compiling this data over the years, any unordinary behavior is always noted, and it kind of just creates like a compilation of data for these individuals as well, so we can track things like how many calves they've had, their migration patterns, if they're returning to the same spots or different spots, their feeding habits, where they're feeding, what they're feeding on, any entanglement history, we can see that from scarring. And this is important, again, for just this compilation of identities for these individuals and the continued research that we can use for conservation of these animals.
Going into what we learned, we definitely gained a lot of skills relating to just recognizing and identifying these whale behaviors, but also being able to explain it to 5-year-old kids, which was definitely a challenge at times. But then also we did, with the data collection and the summary sheets and everything, it was kind of a more exposure to field research and just data collection in general, which was nice to have some experience, some professional experience with. And then in a broader aspect, we definitely got more comfortable public speaking. Not to say that we're like experts, but we just got more comfortable either talking over a microphone or even just to large groups, as you can see in that picture. And we did definitely get to see that education is a major part of conservation. Our passengers would definitely have a lot more respect and just passion for the whales than any other species we would see once they were able to see them in their natural environment. And then also we got to see firsthand like a bunch of different career fields within this internship, because obviously we saw the educational side, but then we also we worked right under our naturalist as well as our captain. So we got to see any possible ideas that we would have in our future.
Hogan. Great Stranger Things ladies well.
Yeah.
Here.
So hi, I'm Jake Hogan, and I was a planning and zoning intern for the town of Colchester this summer. It's Colchester's logo. It's pretty cool. So this is me and my supervisor, Kathy on the road. She is the director of planning and zoning for the town of Colchester. So what she does and what the department does is make sure that any people who are using or developing on land in Colchester are compliant with the regulations. They figure out how to update the regulations. They, propose new regulations, lots of regulations. Everything about land use in Colchester kind of goes through them. And so on the next slide, another important thing that they do is contribute to town plans. This is kind of like what I was focusing on during the summer. So town plans basically guide policy for the coming years in the town. So like the 2019 town plan is like, okay, in the next couple of years, what is Colchester going to do? What actions are they going to take to, better the economy, take care of the people? It proposes like new laws, new policies, things like that. And so the comprehensive plan can be also supplemented by more specific plans, like an open space plan, which is obviously more environmentally focused. And so that kind of, open space is a pretty broad term, anything from agricultural fields to recreational spaces. And if we had more time, I was going to ask you what you think is wrong with this picture, but I just put a big red arrow to speed it up. Their current open space plan is older than me. So basically on the next slide, what I did this summer was start kind of the process of like creating a new open space plan, just kind of like laying a foundation on which like more work could be done. Plans take like years to complete. So really I was just kind of like making outlines and like ideas for how they could complete a new open space plan. Along with other stuff, I would just kind of help out with whatever Kathy Ann was working on, whatever research needed to be done. On the next slide, so I learned a lot about like land use policy and the environmental impacts, how policy is like a way for environmental and education to like have tangible impacts in communities. Also like how municipal government works. I attended like planning commission meetings, DRB meetings. I engaged a little bit with the select board, and also the importance of having environmental leaders at multiple scales. Like, graduates of Rubenstein need to be in the federal government and state government, and local government, and in corporations, really everywhere, all kind of building upon each other's work and complementing each other's work.
Hi everyone, so I'm just going to introduce a little video that I made to explain what I did this summer. So I just really wanted to show you all what I did. My name is Julia, and I worked for Vermont Urban and Community Forestry. One thing to note, I did forget to add subtitles. I'm really sorry if any of you guys need subtitles, and so if you can't hear anything I said, I will be happy to clarify anything. I hope you enjoy.
I was fortunate to work with Vermont Urban and Community Forestry. I helped take inventory of street trees in Windsor and London. I helped map some of Vermont's biggest trees and promote a free tree giveaway program called Community Canopy. Through an interview series with the team, I learned about some challenges the community face when caring for trees. Urban and community forestry is all about the connection between people and trees.
So continue from our downtown centers all the way up to the top of our mountain. I think the biggest challenge that we see in Vermont is the municipal capacity to manage and think about planning and properly selecting the right trees for these spaces for everyone to have access to healthy trees, not dead or dying trees, but healthy trees. We really need to look carefully at where the biggest challenges are, where there are literal gaps in the canopy for people who are not accessing trees, understand why it's difficult to have trees there, and then work from the ground up with those community members to hear their concerns, to get trees to their neighborhoods as best we can in the ways that they want to see, so that everyone can feel that they have some benefit from being near trees, however they want to do that. We've been very interested in black ash and what's going to happen once emerald ash borer is more widespread in the state, because black ash both has really important cultural significance for indigenous people in the Northeast, and it's also really important hydrologically. It's a wetland species.
With the care and support of the team, we were able to create outreach materials such as this one to share learning in different spaces. Thanks for listening.
All right, we have Jonas.
Hey guys, I'm Jonas. I'm a second year forestry student here at UVM, and this summer I was a research technician for the vineyard pathology department at Cornell University's agriculture research facility in Geneva, New York. So the goal of Cornell's research facility in Geneva is to provide practical solutions for the agriculture industry in New York. There's all sorts of different operations which go on in our climate and our economy, and those can range from genetic issues to disease control to pest management. And we aim to tackle all sorts of those different problems in the different subsects of the agriculture research facility. I was in the vineyard pathology department, so we specialize in a few different diseases and insects which are super detrimental to the grape growing industry in New York, which is really robust. The Finger Lakes provide sort of the perfect climate for the cultivation of wine grapes, and it's the largest wine industry on the entire East Coast. A lot comes out of there, but along with that industry comes logistics and the tackling of different disease issues. So naturally, a lot of our work happens outdoors. A central component of our research this summer under my principal investigator, Katie Gold, was looking at the viability of aerial robotic detection for these different diseases. It's really labor intensive, cost intensive, and just sort of clunky to manually scan for these different diseases in vineyards. And so we use these big aerial drones that cost as much as a house and send them up, scan fields to see if we can use robotic technology to artificially and robotically scan for those diseases without people having to do it. However, the technology is relatively untested, and so as an intern, I got to do the clunky manual scanning for these diseases. So I spent a lot of time out in our control vineyards where we cultivate these different diseases, scanning and verifying the data that would come out of the drones. I also did a lot of work just maintaining our vineyards. Cornell owns and maintains these plots of land where our research happens. And so I went through, did a lot of weeding, did a lot of putting in new vines. We created a new section of vineyard over in one of our plots this year. And so a lot of that work fell to me. Next slide. Not quite as glorious, but we also do a lot of work indoors, which is just as important. In our lab, we analyze a lot of samples that come out of the field. We go in, inventory the data coming out of the drones, coming out of the manual notebooks that I take down. And then Cornell also has a huge greenhouse facility where we would cultivate research stock for replanting our outdoor vineyards and producing research material for inoculation. We do all sorts of indoor experiments with the mildews and other diseases that we scan for. So that's about it. Big thank you to Katie Gold, my PI, and David Combs, my boss, for having me on the research.
Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a natural resources major. I'm a senior, and I worked with the Vermont DEC on a cyanobacteria project, and it's kind of still in progress, but I'm going to tell you about it. So I mainly worked with this machine here. It's called a flow cam. It's similar to a microscope, but water flows through it, and it snaps images of each particle that it picks up. And apparently I'm the only person here that knows how to use it, which is cool. And these are like the samples that I would put through the machine. And the main project was creating image libraries. And the final project is going to be a deep learning classifier. It's going to speed up phytoplankton analysis that will assist the state in monitoring harmful algae blooms. So this is what I learned. I was able to identify various species. You can see them here. I had to identify basically anything I saw, which was cool. Those were some of my favorites. And then I got to see the spatial distribution of blooms, where there was more dense areas of phytoplankton, and how to take various water samples in the field, which is cool. So these are just some images of that. And some takeaways would be that the use of FlowChem can speed up algae ID, and when automated, like this project plans to do, it could help speed up the monitoring of harmful algae blooms. And with this machine that I was using, there's valuable calculations that are given, such as biovolume. So that's something to consider with a study like this. And it could be used as an alternative to microscopes, but it depends on what you're looking at, really. And this system of automated monitoring using the FlowCam for algae is already being used in places like Sweden and Africa, so pretty cool stuff. Thank you.
Hi, Angelo.
Hi everyone, I'm Angelo. I'm a junior wildlife biology and forestry major here at UVM. And this summer I worked out of Professor Tony D'Amato's lab as a forestry field research assistant. So the project that I was hired for takes place at the Nulhegan River Basin Division of the Silvio O. Conte National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. And there, Professor D'Amato had a project. We partnered with the Wildlife Refuge, where they seek to diversify the canopy cover, really getting some complexity horizontally and vertically through the environment there. And they did that by creating these patch cuts throughout the forest, and then planting seedlings of historically important conifer species in those patch cuts. So my crew's job was data collection. So we went out there to over 300 of these sites you can see on this geotiff, each within one of 33 blocks labeled out there in the forest. And our job was to take a continuous survey of the overstory. So there was a crew last year that went out and established all of these sites, labeled all the trees, and placed stem tracers for stuff like understory index and sapling monitoring. So what we did is we went out there and we measured the diameter of each of these trees. We estimated the ground cover of different herbaceous species, and we tallied saplings and microplots within each of the plots. And on paper, it sounded easy because we just had our GPS on our phones, we just walk over each of these different plots. But in reality, a lot of the time, the trees were completely missing because of the patch cuts. And so we spent what should be a half-hour, 15-minute job, sometimes 2.5 hours, because we couldn't see any of the trees because they were all gone. As well as, we got your traditional field work hazards. We had moose everywhere, and so as we're walking through the woods, we don't know where we're going. We got to call out to make sure we're not getting in the way of any moose. We kind of charge out of the woods. So for what I learned, aside from lots of herbaceous species ID, it was really a great opportunity to integrate all of the practical tools that I learned throughout the different forestry classes I've taken at UVM, and really bring that to fruition in a fieldwork job. There wasn't a whole lot of new techniques I learned, but it was really a great opportunity to really see it in action, how it is utilized in a science field.
Stretch.
All right, hi, I'm Mary Roth, and this summer I was up in northern Michigan working for a certified arborist who was also a private consulting forester. So there are kind of two sides to this. One was Northern Michigan Tree Doctor, and the other one was Schillinger Forestry. So it was really cool. I got to get experience with urban tree care, forest management, and timber sales. First up, urban tree care. I spent a lot of time doing this. And this was just treating private landowners' kind of valued landscape trees. So I did a lot of fertilization, whether with a root probe, which was injecting it right into the soil, or just ground soaking and like pouring stuff right around the trees. And there was also spray applications and trunk injections of pesticides and fungicides. The spraying came from that giant F-350 there with the big spray rig on the back with the bags of chemicals that we would mix up. And then the trunk injection was basically like giving the tree an IV and letting it take up these chemicals to help prevent insects and disease. And then my favorite part was the forest inventory. So I did get to be in the woods sometimes. This was basically just a precursor to creating forest management plans. We were hired by the local conservancy to do some inventory on some properties they had recently acquired. And so we were just doing systematic random sampling. We had a prism to do about like a plot per acre. And this is all the data that we collected. We're doing a lot of data on specific trees, just about getting ready for potential timber sales, and then also just other site characteristics like invasive species, deer browse, etc. And that was really fun, but of course, what comes with doing lots and lots of plots out in the woods is lots and lots of data to entry. So I also spent a lot of time on Excel, poring over numbers, punching them in, and then creating various charts and stuff to provide the conservancy with. Finally, I got to do a lot of timber marking, which was pretty cool. So this was just setting up timber sales for private landowners. I did a lot of red pine. There were two properties that I did mainly. One was a red pine first thinning, so you're just taking every third row. The other was a red pine second thinning, so from what's left over, you take every third tree. And then I also did a couple days of hardwood timber marking, which is a lot more complicated than the red pine, but it's still really cool to see all of the elements that go into trying to improve a timber stand. Yeah, that's me just like covered head to toe trying to keep the red paint off of it. It's pretty nasty stuff. It's really exciting to kind of get that private sector experience. It's really hard work, but it was rewarding.
Hey guys, I'm Jamie Loyst. I'm a junior environmental science major here at UVM, and this summer I worked with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources with the DEC, specifically with the aquatic invasive species, which here are some that I worked with. The AIS there, we focus on a lot of projects, and Kim Jensen, my amazing supervisor, gave me the opportunity to kind of do a little bit of everything. So we have the VIP program, the Greeter program, water chestnut operations, we do plant surveys, and then we also focus on zebra mussel sampling. I'll talk more about it. So this is the main project I worked on. So it was really cool because I got to see it from start to finish. So we got to pick 25 different lakes to sample for zebra mussels based on many factors like the calcium, if there was motorboat access, and if it was next to a lake that already had zebra mussels. I got to use the plankton net toes, and I got to do like environmental DNA, which was really cool because I didn't even know what environmental DNA was before this. So we would collect 4 samples at the boat launch, the inlet, the outlet, and the middle of the lake. So I got to use a boat and got to see all of Vermont, which is really, really cool. And then the last part is we actually got to go to the lab and analyze the samples with a microscope, which here are the zebra mussel villagers, which is like the larvae of the zebra mussels. So I got to learn a lot about looking under a microscope and seeing what everything looked like, which is really cool. And I also worked with water chestnut, which is just we would go kayaking and do transects. So our kayaks would be parallel so that we could harvest all of the water chestnut and make sure that we didn't leave any and you just basically would pull up the root. But it was really, really pretty. And once again, you got to visit really cool places in Vermont. So that's water chestnut. And then lastly, I did Eurasian water milfoil, and I actually took a scuba course here at UVM, which I would highly recommend. And I actually got to use my scuba cert for this internship to harvest Eurasian water milfoil. So I got to see many fish and got to really understand this plant because I didn't know much about it before. And I think doing this internship was really cool because a lot of people on the lake had a lot of knowledge about these plants, which I think that, like, I'm from Long Island and a lot of people would not know what most of these plants are, so I thought it was really, really cool. And I got to work with an amazing team. Kim Jensen, she was my supervisor and she was amazing. So I would highly recommend looking into this, but that's it.
Right, Erin and then Elias.
All right, hi everybody, I'm Erin. I'm a junior forestry major and a sustainable landscape horticulture minor. And this summer I worked with a company called Hepatica doing some landscape management. And Hepatica, only species in its genus, just like the ginkgo, pretty cool. And this picture here is from Rocky Dale over Bristol. If anybody's been there, it's really cool. So, you know, I'm up here as a forestry major, so why am I over here talking about landscaping? And it has to do a lot with what I'm really interested in and certain departments of forestry that I'm interested in. I'm more of a urban-suburban type of person, and I'm really interested in transforming how we see ourselves and how we see the plant communities around us in these areas, and transforming your typical suburban garden from plant, bark mulch, another plant, more bark mulch, into something that's actually a piece of artwork, and it's something that we can enjoy and that nature can enjoy. And so I also want to touch on what is landscape management versus landscape design, because I was doing mostly landscape management, which is basically upkeep of a place that's already been installed. I wasn't doing a whole lot of installation, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. Basically, what I was doing day to day was doing a lot of maintenance, which you can see here in these two photos, the before and the after. And it may not look like much, but that was 4 hours work. So, and so yeah. So basically my daily tasks were going through people's properties. I worked about 15, 20 different properties. I go to different ones every day, sometimes 2 per day. And you just go through all the gardens that they had, edge them, weed them, rake them, prune them, just everything to keep upkeep where they should be. And this project actually over here is one of the big installation projects I got to do this summer, which is awesome. Over 2,000 perennials installation that took 5 days, which was a lot. It's on the middle of the hill in the middle of nowhere in Heinsberg, but it was really fun to do. And that was one of an installation project that I did, which was awesome, to talk to my boss about the plant list and why each plant was chosen and what its purpose could be in this sort of ecosystem that we were creating. And so my thoughts on this experience is that I had a really great time learning the ins and outs of management. And what I've really learned is you're not going to have a successful garden if you don't consider management. Management is so much more important than design. Anybody can slap down design, but it takes so many more people and so much more effort to maintain it for years to come. And that's really important to consider for all aspects of how we treat plants, especially in suburban settings where your garden is sort of treated like a kitchen. Once you're done, it's okay. Your dishwasher might break, but you don't have to worry about it. It's not like your tiles are going to grow every single year. You have to weed between the tiles, like doing a garden. And so this is just such an awesome project for me to take part in. And that garden over there, that picture is from the big installation that I did a couple months later, which is awesome. And all my team members will be here. So thank you.
Right, last but not least, bring us home.
So this summer, my name is Elias Davis. I'm a senior forestry student, and I worked this last winter for Ben Campbell's forestry and land management company in Starksboro, Vermont. He is a single small person operation, and I contacted him in the middle of the winter when he was actually really desperate for help to meet deadlines for his management plans. And I was basically tasked with cruising the stands, gathering data, putting them together, synthesizing them into a management plan, running them through a couple of programs that would analyze it, and then off of his template, creating maps of the stands and basically updating the plans for him to put the final stamp on. This is his dog, Hazel. She came in with me multiple times. I worked all over Addison County at many sites, primarily in agricultural lands and sugaring stands, but I also did some conservation lands, and all of it was pretty much private. The goals of the landowners tended to focus towards timber sales and harvesting for firewood for their own personal uses, and I basically had the task of trying to meet their goals and trying to make that with good silvicultural practices. And I often got to speak directly to them about what they wanted to do with their land, and on the phone with them to kind of figure out the goals that we could best meet. This is over. This is a 100-year-old sugar shack that's been sitting in the woods. But that was kind of a cool thing I found. Anyway, next slide. This job taught me a whole lot about the human side of forestry. I got to meet people, talk to them, and speak to them about what they want to do with their land. And it got me to the chance to work directly with them and see the problems that the people of Vermont are facing with managing their land, and how I am the forester trying to make their land as healthy as possible, trying to best meet their goals and what I should do for the land itself. It showed me how quickly and effectively consulting forestry can have a change and impact on the land, because you implement a management plan, it gets carried out, you have a cut that happens, you can see that the next season, you can see the direct effort of your work and your prescription on the land immediately. So, thank you very much. This is a 58 centimeter diameter white oak that I found on the edge of a cornfield. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Great work. I know we'll all be in contact throughout the term, so if you've got any questions about anything else moving forward, you know how to get in contact with me. Thank you for your presentations. They were awesome. Thanks to the folks on Teams who are supporting you virtually. Grab some snacks on the way out, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night, Anna and Kim.
Good night, Megan. Great job.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Kim. It was great to see you, kind of virtually.
Yeah, thank you. Great
Good
job,
night.
everyone.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.